Welcome to Almost Alone. Tonight's episode is about trust, the kind you give without thinking when you hand your credit card to a stranger and receive a door code in return. Vacation rentals have changed how we travel. No hotels, no front desks, just a private space, a set of keys, and the promise that you'll be left alone. But what happens when that promise isn't kept? What happens when the person who owns the property decides the cameras aren't just for security? When the host has a key and knows exactly when you're asleep? When someone else is living in the space you thought was yours? These three stories come from people who thought they were renting privacy. They weren't. Before we begin, if you find value in these stories, consider subscribing. It helps the channel grow and keeps these episodes coming. Let's begin. I'm 29 now. This happened 3 years ago, during what was supposed to be a healing trip. I'd just gone through a rough breakup, the kind where you need to get away from everything familiar and think. I wanted silence, distance, a place where no one knew me, and I could just exist for a while. I found a cabin listing in the Smoky Mountains. The photos were beautiful: wood interior, wraparound porch, floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over ridges that went on forever. The reviews were perfect, 5 stars across the board. People talked about how peaceful it was, how private, how the host was friendly but respectful of boundaries. It was exactly what I needed. I booked it for a week in late September, when the leaves were just starting to turn and the tourist crowds had thinned out. The drive up was gorgeous. Winding mountain roads, little towns tucked into valleys, that smell of pine and cold air that makes you feel like you've left the world behind. The cabin was about 40 minutes outside of Gatlinburg, deep enough into the hills that you couldn't see another structure from the porch, just trees and sky, and the faint outline of mountains in the distance. I arrived around 4 in the afternoon. The host, his name was Derek, was waiting for me in the driveway. Mid-40s, flannel shirt, friendly smile. He helped me carry my bags up to the porch and walked me through everything: how to work the wood stove, where the extra blankets were, which breaker to flip if the power went out. Normal host stuff. But he lingered, not in an obvious way, just longer than necessary. He asked questions. Was I traveling alone? How long was I staying? What was my plan for the week? I answered politely, told him I was just here to relax, maybe do some hiking, read a lot. He nodded, smiled, said that sounded perfect. Then he asked if I lived nearby or if I'd driven far. I said I'd come from Knoxville, about 2 hours. He asked what I did for work. I told him I was in marketing. He asked if I was close with my family, if anyone knew I was here. At the time, I thought he was just making conversation, being a good host. But looking back, I can see what he was really doing. He was mapping out my isolation. He mentioned he lived just down the mountain, about 15 minutes away, and that I should call if I needed anything, day or night. He said it twice. Then he gave me his personal cell number, even though it was already in the app. Don't hesitate, he said, making eye contact a little too long. I mean it, anything at all. I thanked him, and he finally left. The first night was exactly what I'd hoped for: quiet, peaceful. I made dinner, sat on the porch with a glass of wine, and watched the sun drop behind the ridge. No phone service up there, but the cabin had Wi-Fi, so I wasn't completely cut off. I read for a while, then went to bed early. I slept better than I had in months. The next day, I woke up late, made coffee, and spent the morning on the porch with a book. Around noon, I decided to drive into town for groceries. I was only gone for maybe 2 hours. When I got back, something felt off. Nothing dramatic, just small things. The coffee mug I'd left on the kitchen counter was in the sink. I was sure I'd left it out. I remembered setting it down before I left. but maybe I'd put it in the sink without thinking. Memory's weird like that. Then I noticed the dish towel. I draped it over the oven handle. Now it was folded in thirds, hanging neatly. I stood there staring at it for a long moment. Then I noticed the living room, the throw blanket on the couch. I'd left it bunched up in the corner where I'd been sitting. Now it was folded and draped over the back of the couch. The kind of neat, deliberate fold you see in staging photos. I walked through the rest of the cabin. In the bathroom, the hand towel was refolded. In the bedroom, the curtains were open wider than I'd left them. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I'd done these things that morning and forgotten. Maybe the cleaning service had come by to restock something and tidied up while they were there. But the cleaning service only came between guests. I'd confirmed that when I booked. I tried to shake it off. Went back to my book, made dinner, poured another glass of wine. That night, I woke up around 2 in the morning. I don't know what pulled me out of sleep. Not a sound exactly. Just that feeling, the kind that makes you open your eyes and hold your breath without knowing why. I lay there in the dark, listening. Nothing. Just the hum of the mini fridge in the kitchen and the faint creak of the house, settling. Then I heard gravel crunching outside. Slow. Deliberate. Like someone walking carefully, trying not to make noise. I got up and went to the window. The driveway was empty. But through the trees, down the slope toward the road, I saw headlights. Just for a second, maybe 2. Then darkness. I watched for a few minutes. Nothing moved. No engine sounds. No lights. I convinced myself it was someone turning around. A lost hiker. A neighbor using the driveway to reverse. But we were 40 minutes from town. There were no neighbors. I went back to bed but didn't sleep much. Every sound made me tense. Every creak felt like a footstep. The next morning, day 3, I decided to do some work. I'd brought my laptop to catch up on a few things, and the cabin had a desk near the window with a nice view. I plugged in my charger and noticed the outlet was loose. When I crouched down to adjust it, I saw something behind the desk. A small black box tucked into the corner where the wall met the floor. At first, I thought it was a router or a surge protector, but when I pulled it out, I realized it wasn't connected to anything. It had a tiny lens on the front, a light that blinked red every few seconds. A camera. My stomach dropped. I sat there holding it, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. Maybe it was for security. Maybe the host used it to check on the property when it was empty. But it was pointed at the desk, at the chair, at where I'd been sitting. I stood up and looked around the room with fresh eyes. The smoke detector above the bed looked wrong. The plastic casing didn't sit flush with the ceiling. There was a gap, just big enough to see another tiny lens, another blinking light. I felt my skin crawl. I went through the entire cabin systematically, checking every corner, every shelf, every fixture that seemed even slightly out of place. I found 7 cameras total, 1 behind the desk where I'd been working, 1 in the living room bookshelf, positioned to capture the couch and the door, 1 in the bathroom, hidden in the vent above the shower, 1 in the bedroom closet, angled toward the bed, 1 outside on the deck, pointed at the hot tub, 1 in the kitchen, tucked behind a decorative plant on top of the refrigerator, and the 1 in the smoke detector, above the bed. Every single one was active, recording. The red lights blinking in steady rhythm. I pulled my phone out and checked the Wi-Fi network. There were 2 connections. One was labeled Cabin Guest Wi-Fi. The other was Security System. I felt sick. I started packing immediately. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely zip my suitcase. I didn't fold anything, just threw everything into my bags, grabbed my toiletries from the bathroom, didn't even check if I'd left anything behind. I just wanted out. I was carrying the last bag to my car when my phone buzzed. A text from Derek. "Everything okay? Noticed you've been moving around a lot." I stopped in the driveway and stared at the screen. He was watching, right now, in real time. My heart was pounding. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I didn't respond. I threw my bag in the trunk, got in the car, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so hard, I could barely get the key in the ignition. I pulled out of the driveway too fast, tires spitting gravel. As I came around the first curve down the mountain, I saw headlights coming up. A truck, dark green, moving fast. I kept driving, heart pounding, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles went white. The road was narrow, barely wide enough for two vehicles. The truck slowed as it got closer, and I had to slow down too. We were going to pass within a few feet of each other. I couldn't see the driver's face through the glare of his headlights, but I knew it was him. He pulled to the side to let me pass, but he didn't stop. His window was down. He was looking at me. I kept my eyes straight ahead and drove past him. In my rearview mirror, I saw him brake. Then the reverse lights came on. He was turning around, coming after me. I pressed the accelerator, taking the curves faster than I should have. The road was winding, steep, nothing but trees and drop-offs on either side. My tires skidded on loose gravel at one turn, and I felt the back end slide out. I corrected, kept going. I could see his headlights behind me, getting closer. The mountain road seemed endless. Every curve looked the same. I couldn't tell how far I had to go before I reached the highway. Then my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Derek. I didn't answer. It rang again and again. Finally, I reached the main highway. I didn't stop at the intersection, just pulled out, cutting off another car. The driver honked, but I didn't care. I drove straight to the police station in Gatlinburg. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes, shaking, before I finally went inside. The officer I spoke to was kind but skeptical. He asked if Derek had threatened me, if he'd touched me, if he'd done anything illegal besides the cameras. I said no, just the cameras, and following me. He asked if I'd seen him actually following me, or if I'd just seen a truck on the same road. I said I saw him turn around and come after me. The officer took my statement. He asked if the cameras were disclosed in the listing. I pulled up the rental page on my phone and scrolled through every line. Nothing. No mention of cameras anywhere. He made a copy of the listing and my text exchange with Derek. He said someone would follow up. I never heard from him. I reported it to the rental platform that same day. I uploaded screenshots of the cameras, the texts, everything. 3 days later, I got a generic email saying they'd investigated the matter and removed the listing. But a week after that, I got a call from a detective in Sevier County. His name was Detective Morrison. He asked if I'd be willing to come in and give a formal statement. I said yes. When I arrived at his office, he had a folder on his desk. He opened it and showed me 3 other police reports, 3 other women, 3 similar stories. One woman, 26, had found cameras in the bedroom and bathroom. When she confronted Derek, he claimed they were for property security and said she must have missed the disclosure. She left immediately and reported him to the platform. Nothing happened. Another woman, 31, said Derek had shown up at the cabin unannounced at 11 p.m., claiming he needed to check the water heater. She refused to let him in. He left, but she said he sat in his truck at the end of the driveway for over an hour. She was too scared to leave her room. The third woman, 24, didn't report anything to police, but her mother did, after her daughter came home early from the trip and wouldn't talk about what happened. Detective Morrison said none of them had pressed charges. The platform kept shutting down his listings, but he'd create new accounts under slightly different names, use different photos of the same property, and keep operating. Then Morrison told me they'd executed a search warrant on Derek's house. They found external hard drives, dozens of them, organized by date, hundreds of hours of footage, women showering, changing clothes, sleeping, walking around the cabin in towels, thinking they were alone. He'd been doing this for at least 3 years. Morrison asked if I'd be willing to testify if the case went to trial. I said yes without hesitation. Derek was arrested 2 weeks later. The charges were voyeurism, unlawful surveillance, and stalking. His lawyer tried to argue that the cameras were for security purposes, that Derek had every right to monitor his own property, that the guests were informed via the rental agreement's fine print about security measures. The prosecutor pulled up every single rental listing Derek had ever posted. Not one of them mentioned cameras. Not in the description. Not in the house rules. Not anywhere. The jury didn't buy his defense. During the trial, I sat in the courtroom and watched Derek avoid eye contact with me. He looked smaller than I remembered. Quieter. Like he wanted to disappear into his chair. The prosecutor asked me to describe what I found. I told them about each camera, about the text message while I was packing, about him following me down the mountain. Then they asked me a question I wasn't prepared for. Do you believe the defendant would have stopped at watching? I looked at Derek. He was staring at the table in front of him. I said no, because I remembered the way he'd lingered that first day, the questions he'd asked, the way he'd made sure I knew he was close by, just down the mountain, available anytime I needed. He wasn't just watching, he was studying, learning patterns, waiting for the right moment. I think Morrison believed that too, because during his closing argument, he said something that still sticks with me. This wasn't about property security. This was about control, about power, about watching women in their most vulnerable moments and knowing they had no idea he was there. Derek was sentenced to 4 years. He'll be out in less than 2 now. Maybe already is. I think about that sometimes. About what would have happened if I hadn't found the cameras, if I'd stayed the full week, if I'd kept believing that the moved items and the refolded towels were just my imagination. I think about the footage he kept, the hours and hours of women who had no idea they were being watched, and I think about the fact that he's going to get out. And when he does, I don't think he's going to stop. He's just going to get better at hiding the cameras. I'm 32 now. This happened 5 years ago during a girls' weekend in Destin, Florida. 4 of us, me, my best friend Rachel, and 2 friends from college, Amy and Jen. We'd been planning it for months. A long weekend at the beach. No kids, no husbands, just us. We rented a house right on the water. 3 bedrooms, big kitchen, wraparound deck with ocean views. The photos looked perfect, and the price was reasonable for that close to the beach. We arrived on a Thursday afternoon in late June. It was self-check-in, lockbox by the front door, code sent via text. No host to meet, no instructions beyond a laminated sheet on the kitchen counter. The house was beautiful. Hardwood floors, vaulted ceilings, big windows that let in so much light the whole place seemed to glow. We spent the first hour just walking through, claiming bedrooms, opening wine, blasting music. Rachel took the master. Amy and Jen took the 2 smaller rooms upstairs. I took the room on the first floor, near the back of the house. It felt like exactly what we needed. That first night, we stayed up late on the deck, drinking and laughing and talking, the way you only do with people who've known you forever. We went to bed around 2, happy and exhausted. The next morning, Amy mentioned she'd heard something during the night. Footsteps, she said, pouring coffee in the kitchen. Like someone walking around upstairs. Rachel laughed. You were drunk. You probably dreamed it. Amy shrugged. Maybe, but it sounded real, like someone pacing back and forth above my room. There's nothing above your room, Jen said. Just the attic. Exactly, Amy said. That's why it was weird. I didn't think much of it. Old beach houses make noise. Wood expanding in the heat, wind off the ocean, pipes settling. It's never quiet, even when it feels like it should be. We spent the day on the beach, came back sunburned and tired, showered, and went out for dinner. By the time we got back to the house, it was almost midnight. That's when I noticed something. I'd left my phone charger on the kitchen counter that morning. I remembered because I'd been annoyed I forgot to plug it in before we left. Now it was on the coffee table in the living room, plugged into the outlet by the couch. I stared at it for a second, confused. "Did one of you move my charger?" I asked. Rachel looked up from her phone. "What?" "My charger. I left it in the kitchen. Now it's over here." "I didn't touch it," she said. Amy and Jen both shook their heads. "You probably moved it and forgot," Jen said. "Maybe. But I didn't remember doing it. That night I had trouble falling asleep. I kept thinking about the charger, about Amy's footsteps, about small things that didn't quite add up but weren't worth making a big deal over. Around 1 in the morning, I heard something. A soft thud, like something heavy being set down. Somewhere above me. I lay there listening. Then I heard it again, followed by a faint creaking sound, like weight shifting on old floorboards. I sat up and strained to hear more. Nothing. Just the hum of the air conditioner and the distant sound of waves. I told myself it was the house settling. That's what houses do, especially old ones near the ocean. But I didn't sleep well the rest of the night. The next morning, day 2, Rachel said she'd heard something too. "I thought I heard someone in the hallway last night," she said over breakfast. "Like 2 or 3 in the morning. I almost got up to check, but then it stopped." "See?" Amy said. "I told you. This place is noisy." Jen suggested it might be the neighbors. The houses on that street were close together. Maybe we were hearing sounds from next door. It made sense. We all wanted it to make sense. We spent that afternoon shopping in town, came back with bags of groceries and wine, and made dinner together. It felt normal again. Easy. We were laughing and drinking, and I forgot about the weird feelings from the night before. But that night, our third night there, everything changed. I woke up around 2:30, not because of a sound, because of a smell. Something faint, unpleasant, like body odor mixed with stale fabric. I lay there in the dark, trying to place it. Then I heard it. Footsteps, in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. Moving past my door toward the kitchen. I froze. We'd all gone to bed hours ago. Rachel's room was upstairs. Amy and Jen's rooms were upstairs. My room was the only one on the first floor. There shouldn't be anyone in the hallway. I held my breath and listened. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard the refrigerator door open, the faint hum as the light came on, the soft clink of glass. Someone was in the kitchen. I grabbed my phone and texted the group chat. "Is someone downstairs?" A minute passed. Then Rachel responded. "No, why?" "I hear someone in the kitchen." Amy texted. "We're all upstairs." My heart was pounding. I got out of bed, unlocked my door as quietly as I could, and cracked it open. The hallway was dark. The kitchen light was off. But I could see a shadow, someone standing near the refrigerator. I slammed my door shut and locked it. Within seconds, Rachel was pounding on my door. "Let me in." I opened it, and she rushed in with Amy and Jen right behind her, all of them wide-eyed, breathing hard. "Did you see someone?" Rachel whispered. "There was someone in the kitchen," I said. "I saw them." We stood there in my room, door locked, listening. Nothing. After a few minutes, Rachel said, "Maybe it was a shadow from the streetlight." "It moved," I said. "It opened the refrigerator." Amy's voice was shaking. "What if someone broke in?" Jen pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police." While we waited, we heard it again. Footsteps. Not in the hallway this time. Above us, in the attic. We all looked up at the ceiling. The footsteps moved slowly from one side of the house to the other. Then they stopped. Then we heard something that made my blood run cold. The sound of the attic access panel sliding open. We ran into the hallway. The panel in the ceiling was open, not all the way, just a crack, and we could see darkness beyond it. "Hello," Rachel called out, her voice cracking. No response. Amy was already on the phone with 911. She was whispering frantically to the dispatcher, telling them someone was in our house, that they were in the attic. The dispatcher told us to go outside and wait. We grabbed our phones and ran out the front door in our pajamas, barefoot on the driveway, huddled together under the streetlight. The police arrived 8 minutes later. 2 officers. They went inside with flashlights drawn. We waited. After what felt like forever, one of them came out and asked who'd been in the attic recently. "No one," Rachel said. "We didn't even know there was attic access." He nodded slowly. "You need to come see this." We followed him inside and upstairs. He pointed to the attic access panel, now fully open. One of the officers was on a ladder, shining his flashlight into the space above. "Got a sleeping bag up here," he called down. "Pillow, food wrappers, water bottles. Looks like someone's been staying here." My stomach dropped. They pulled everything down. A rolled-up sleeping bag, pillow with no case, granola bar wrappers, an empty plastic water bottle, a phone charger with a long extension cord snaking across the rafters, and a pair of binoculars. One of the officers looked at us. "How long have you been staying here?" "2 nights," I said. "We got here Thursday." He looked at the sleeping bag, then back at us. "This setup looks older than that. I'd say whoever was up there has been here at least a week, maybe longer." Rachel's face went pale. "What do you mean, whoever was up there? Where are they now?" "We're looking." They searched the house. Every room, every closet, the garage, the outdoor storage shed. Then one of them radioed something and jogged down the street. 10 minutes later, they brought him back in handcuffs. A man, maybe 35, skinny, unshaven, wearing a jacket that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. He'd been hiding in a storage shed 2 houses down, waiting for them to leave. We gave statements, told them about the sounds, the moved items, the footsteps. The detective who arrived later asked if we'd noticed anything missing. Any food gone, any toiletries used. We had. Small things. A bottle of shampoo that seemed lighter. Leftovers that disappeared faster than they should have. A bag of chips we'd opened that was suddenly empty. We'd blamed each other. The detective said the man had been squatting in vacation rentals along that stretch of beach for almost 6 months. He'd watch listings, figure out check-in patterns, slip in through unlocked windows or back doors, and hide in the attic. When guests arrived, he'd just stay hidden. Come down at night when everyone was asleep. Use the bathroom. Eat food from the fridge. Shower. Charge his phone. He had a system. The binoculars were for watching through the attic vents. He could see into every bedroom. Every bathroom. The detective asked if we'd felt like we were being watched. Amy started crying. The homeowner lived in Atlanta. She rented the property out full-time, never visited. She had a local cleaning service handle turnovers. They'd never checked the attic. Why would they? The man had been there for weeks, through multiple guest stays. The detective told us most of his victims never knew he was there. "You only found out because one of you woke up at the wrong time," he said. "Most people sleep through it. They leave. They write a good review. And he climbs back up and waits for the next guests." I think about that all the time, about how many nights he'd been up there while we were laughing and drinking and sleeping directly below him, about how we'd walked around in towels, changed clothes, had private conversations, never once thinking to look up. About the binoculars, the vents, the perfect view he had of everything we did, and I think about the other guests who stayed there before us. The families with children, the couples on their honeymoon, the solo travelers. How many of them had he watched? How many times had he come down in the dark and stood in their rooms while they slept? We never went back to that house. We checked into a hotel that same night and flew home the next day. None of us have stayed in a vacation rental since. People tell us we're being paranoid, that it was a freak thing, that it'll never happen again, but they didn't see the sleeping bag, the phone charger, the binoculars. They didn't hear the detective say, "Most people never know he's there." Because that's the part that haunts me. Not that we found him, that we almost didn't. I'm 35 now. For 4 years I owned a cabin rental in the mountains outside Asheville, North Carolina. It was a side income thing, something I bought after a good year at work, thinking I'd use it on weekends and rent it out the rest of the time. It worked. The cabin practically paid for itself. Families rented it in the summer. Couples booked it for anniversaries. Hikers stayed there in the fall when the leaves changed. I kept the place clean. The reviews were good, and I made decent money without much effort. I had a cleaning service handle turnovers, and I rarely went up there myself. It was 45 minutes from my house, deep in the woods off a winding mountain road. Beautiful, isolated. Exactly what people wanted when they searched for private mountain retreat. That was the selling point. Total seclusion. No neighbors for miles. I thought that was a good thing. On a Tuesday morning in March, 2 years ago, police knocked on my door at 6 a.m. I opened it to find 2 detectives standing on my porch in the gray pre-dawn light. They introduced themselves, showed badges, and asked if I owned a property at 4382 Ridgeline Road. I said yes, already feeling my stomach drop. They asked if I could come down to the station to answer some questions. I asked what it was about. One of them, Detective Ramirez, said, "A woman escaped from your property last night. She says she was held there against her will for 3 days." The words didn't make sense. I kept waiting for them to say more, to explain how there'd been some mistake. "That's impossible," I said. "No one's staying there right now. The next booking isn't until this weekend." Ramirez said, "We need you to come with us." At the station, they brought me into an interview room. Not because I was under arrest, they said. Just because they needed to ask questions and wanted privacy. They told me what happened. A woman, 24 years old, from Charlotte, had been found on the side of Highway 19 around 11 p.m. the night before. She was barefoot. Her clothes were torn. She had cuts on her feet from running through the woods. A truck driver saw her stumbling along the shoulder and pulled over. She collapsed as soon as he opened his door. She told police she'd been held at a cabin in the mountains. She didn't know exactly where. She'd been unconscious when she was brought there. She woke up in a bedroom with the door locked from the outside and the windows nailed shut. She said she'd been there for 3 days, that she'd been assaulted, that her captor had left that evening to get food and had forgotten to lock the back door. She ran. Didn't stop running until she couldn't run anymore. The cabin she described was mine. Ramirez asked where I was that weekend. I told them, home, with my wife. We'd had friends over for dinner on Saturday. They verified it. Then they asked who was renting the property. I pulled up my booking platform on my phone with shaking hands. The reservation was under a name I recognized. Michael Chen. He'd stayed before. Multiple times, actually. Good guest. Quiet. Always left the place clean. 5-star review from me, 5 stars from him. I showed them his profile. They took my phone and ran the information. 10 minutes later, Ramirez came back and said, "This ID is fake. The phone number's a burner." The email account was created 2 weeks before the first booking. Michael Chen doesn't exist. I felt like I was going to be sick. I need you to show me every booking he's made, Ramirez said. I pulled up my records. Michael Chen had booked 4 times in the past year, always Thursday to Sunday, always requested late check-in after 10 p.m. and early checkout before 8 a.m. Always sent a message saying he valued privacy and preferred no contact during his stay. I thought he was just introverted. A lot of my guests preferred minimal interaction. Ramirez asked if I had security cameras. I did. Exterior only, pointed at the driveway and front porch. I pulled up the footage from that weekend on my app and sent it to them. The video showed a man arriving late Thursday night. Average height, dark jacket, baseball cap pulled low over his face. He unloaded 2 bags from his trunk, a duffel and a backpack, and went inside. The angle didn't capture his face clearly. The next time the camera caught him was Sunday morning, leaving, alone, locking the door behind him like nothing had happened. Ramirez asked if I'd be willing to come to the hospital. I didn't understand why at first. Then he said the victim wanted to see the property owner, wanted to confirm I wasn't involved. We drove to Mission Hospital in silence. Ramirez didn't make small talk. I stared out the window, numb. The woman's name was Sarah. She was in a private room, her mother sitting beside the bed. Sarah looked small under the hospital blankets. Her eyes were red from crying. When I walked in, she flinched. "That's not him," she said immediately, looking at Ramirez. "This is the property owner," he said gently. "Not the man who hurt you." She looked at me again, studying my face. Then she started crying. Her mother asked me to leave. I stood outside in the hallway, leaning against the wall, trying to process what was happening. Ramirez came out a few minutes later. He asked if I'd be willing to help them find the man. I said yes without hesitation. We went back to the station. I pulled up every booking I'd ever received and started looking for patterns. That's when I found them. 3 other accounts. Different names. Marcus Cole, Matt Campbell, David Chang, but similar patterns. Marcus Cole had 1 booking, 8 months earlier. Matt Campbell had 1 booking, about a year ago. David Chang's account existed with my property saved in his favorites, but had never completed a booking. Same late check-in requests. Same no-contact preferences. I pulled the exterior camera footage from Marcus Cole's and Matt Campbell's bookings. Same car, same dark jacket, same baseball cap. It was him. Every time. I felt my chest tighten. I counted the bookings, 6 times. He'd rented my property 6 times in 14 months. Ramirez asked if I'd noticed anything unusual during those stays. Any damage? Any complaints from neighbors? I said no. He'd always left the place clean. I'd even left him good reviews. That's when it hit me. I'd facilitated this. I'd given him the keys. I'd sent him door codes. I'd told him to enjoy his stay. And he'd used my property to hurt people. Ramirez said they were running DNA from the cabin, that they'd know more in a few days. 3 days later, he called me. The DNA matched a case from 8 months earlier. Another woman. Another assault. Different county. She'd never reported the exact location because she was too traumatized to remember details. Just a cabin somewhere in the mountains, she'd told police. Ramirez asked if I thought it could have been my property. I pulled up my bookings from that time period. Marcus Cole had rented it that same weekend. There were others. Over the next week, police connected 2 more victims to bookings at my cabin. Women who'd reported assaults, but couldn't identify where they'd been held. The pattern was clear. The man had been using short-term rentals all over the region. Properties with self-check-in, no host interaction, isolated locations, perfect hunting grounds. Ramirez asked if I'd be willing to leave the listing active. He said they wanted to set up a sting operation. If the suspect tried to book again under a new name, they'd be ready. I said yes. They set up cameras inside the cabin, hidden, professional grade. They had officers on standby 10 minutes away. They briefed me on what to do if I got a booking that matched the pattern. For 3 weeks, I barely slept. Every time my phone buzzed with a notification, my heart stopped. But he never came back. Ramirez said he'd probably figured out they were onto him, that he'd moved on to a different area, found a new property, a new host who didn't ask questions. The case is still open. They never caught him. Sarah, the woman who escaped, gave a victim impact statement even though there was no one to hear it. Her therapist suggested it might help with closure. I read it. Ramirez sent me a copy because he thought I should understand what had happened in my property. She described being drugged at a bar in Charlotte, waking up in a room she didn't recognize, realizing the windows were nailed shut, trying to scream but no one could hear her because the cabin was miles from anyone. She described 3 days of terror, of not knowing if she'd ever get out, of thinking she was going to die there. And she described the moment she found the back door unlocked, the moment she ran into the woods in bare feet, branches cutting her skin, not knowing which direction to go, but knowing she had to keep running. She said the only reason she survived was luck. He forgot to lock one door. That's it. I sold the cabin 4 months later. I couldn't keep it. Couldn't stomach the idea of someone else staying there, sleeping in those rooms, not knowing what had happened. My wife asked why I was selling. I told her I was done with the rental business. She didn't push. But the truth is, I couldn't stop thinking about all those weekends I'd collected payment, sent check-in codes, left polite messages saying, "Enjoy your stay." I thought I was running a business, but I was giving a predator a hunting ground. Ramirez told me it wasn't my fault, that I couldn't have known, that the man was skilled at hiding who he was. But I think about Sarah. I think about the other victims. I think about how many times he used my keys, my codes, my 5-star reviews to hurt people. And I think about the fact that he's still out there, still booking cabins, still targeting women, still relying on hosts like me, who prioritize privacy and don't ask too many questions. I deleted all my rental accounts. I'll never do it again. Not because I'm afraid of losing money, because I'm afraid of what I might unknowingly help someone do. And because every time I see a vacation rental listing now, every time I see secluded, private, no neighbors, I don't see a peaceful retreat. I see a place where someone could scream and no one would hear them, where someone could disappear and no one would know until checkout time, where the host is 45 minutes away and the nearest police station is even farther. That's what I sold, and I'll never forget it. 3 different rentals, 3 different kinds of violation, a host who watched, a stranger who hid, a guest who hurt. The common thread? The assumption that locked doors and privacy settings mean you're actually alone. If you've stayed in a rental and something felt wrong, something you couldn't quite name but couldn't shake, you're not paranoid. Trust that feeling. And if you have a story you'd like to share, you can submit it through the link in the description. Thank you for listening to Almost Alone. Stay safe, stay aware, and check the attic.